Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how we can teach children to share. This is actually a popular topic in childcare centres and also parenting at home with our own children. Sharing is this learned concept that we learned growing up and have been handing down to our own children and children in our care. It is this concept that we need to share toys or activities or belongings with others because it's the right thing to do. If we can just stop for a moment and ask ourselves where we learned this and if it is actually true that children need to share, then it can broaden our perspectives and give us some deeper awareness around this topic that causes so much stress and frustration in parents and educators. Often, sharing, if learned naturally, is actually something that develops over time in children, and they actually grow to be very good at sharing because they want to. Children who are forced to share and taught what sharing is according to parents and educators' own beliefs tend to not learn sharing in this way. They learn that sharing is this thing that they must do against their will when it's something they don't actually want to do. If children are left to play with something that they want without being forced to share, they will naturally want to share and want to help other children to feel good by sharing belongings and toys and activities. So here are some ways that I promote sharing as an early childhood educator, and also how I have raised my own children around the topic of sharing. So when it comes to things at daycare, things that are communal like toys and activities, what tends to happen is one child will be playing with something and another child will come to me upset, and they will say to me that such and such child is not sharing with them. Now, when I worked at a large daycare center in charge of a room of 22 children, often what would tend to happen is other educators would go to that child and tell them, you need to share. You need to take turns, and sometimes a timer would be set for like 5 minutes so that children could share back and forth. And while this could be helpful in some examples like larger rooms of children, it actually doesn't need to be that way in a small daycare environment or at home with children. What I will do is I will say to that child, I know you want a turn and you will get a turn, but for now we're going to let this child finish their play. The reason I do this is because rather than forcing that child to cut their play experience early just to hand that toy over and stop the other child from being upset, I want to give that child their full play experience. They actually don't have to stop playing just because the other child is upset and wants a turn. I can actually validate both children's experiences. I can validate the child who really wants a turn by acknowledging how much they really want a turn and that I'm going to do my best to help them have a turn. And I also validate the child who has the toy and acknowledge that they are engrossed in that play experience and activity, and we don't want to cut these short because we want children to get the full benefit of their play experience. Once that child naturally moves on to something else, I then move in to get that toy and hand it to the other child. I will often find that by this time that child has forgotten and is no longer interested. Now, I've also seen that children who cry and get upset because they really want a toy that somebody else has, if I just back away and I let them work it out for themselves, a lot of the time, the children who have a toy, they don't like to see that other child upset themselves. So they will go and offer that toy to that other child, because naturally children want to be empathetic. They naturally have compassion. They want to share. They want to help other people feel better. It's when we jump in and intervene and try to teach them about sharing and try to make it wrong that they want something all to themselves. It's when this natural compassion and empathy isn't allowed to flourish on its own. It actually becomes suppressed, and then they actually resist sharing and helping other children as a way of rebelling against this type of control. Now, I also don't believe that it's necessary or right to teach children to share their own belongings. Children are quite identified with their own things, and this is a healthy form of identification. It can provide children with a sense of security and contentment, especially when they are out of the home at daycare. It is natural that they want their own things all to themselves, and actually we can demonstrate how healthy this is by having certain things for our own selves as educators and parents, and saying that there's some things that we don't like to share, like special jewelry or special equipment that we have, and we can say, this is mine, I don't want you to use this, but you can use something else of mine. So it's actually okay that we and other children don't like to share certain things that we are very attached to or that we want to look after. So I don't think that it's necessary to force children to share their toys and their belongings just because another child asks for it or gets upset. Often, if we allow children to work out their disputes themselves, like I will often see children fighting over a chair or a toy, and they will be pulling it back and forth from each other. If I can see that nobody's getting hurt, despite the rising of tension and the raising of voices or children becoming upset, I do tend to let this play out for as long as possible, unless one of the children becomes hurt or distressed or calls out to me for help, because it's very important to allow children to come to a solution on their own. A lot of times in my own daycare, I will watch this play out, and one child will eventually give in, and when that happens and they let that child have that toy, that child will actually decide to give it up to the other child, and they naturally come into a place of sharing through their own conflict resolution. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you have anything you'd like to add or any other topics you would like me to share about, please put in the comments below, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.